JFK assassination?
Yes.
Yes. The most important thing is this. The entire nation was fooled and has been maintained in a state of a kind of zombie mentality, just being fed disinformation. The most terrible thing about it, for me, is the depravity of the criminals who did this, and that the public has been persuaded that an innocent man did it all. The fact is that the public has never yet seen an actual photograph of the real President Kennedy in the morgue, or the autopsy photos. The autopsy photos that show a dead man with a single bullet wound to the right side of the head, with a kind of like a strange ghastly look upon his face, is not President Kennedy. The person in all the autopsy, the facial pictures and the overhead shots of the body on the morgue slab there, are Officer J.D. Tippit, the man who was killed 45 minutes after the president was killed, purportedly stopping Oswald on the street. That man was surgically executed. By that I mean he was shot down in the street, but the man who assassinated him walked up to him as he lay in the street, put the gun to his temple, and fired a single shot through his head that did not exit the top of the back of the head. That body was taken instantly. 10 minutes later, less than 10 minutes later, an ambulance was there. The body disappeared. It went to a Methodist hospital, pronounced dead on arrival at 2:30 in the afternoon. It was shipped to Parkland Hospital, the same place where the president's body had been. An autopsy was run on Tippit that was finished at 3:15 p.m., signed, sealed, and delivered by Dr. Earl Rose, the coroner, Dallas County coroner. And it was that body that was presented to the Warren Commission autopsists, 3 doctors who had never in their lives performed an autopsy. 3 men who had never seen President Kennedy. They were presented with this body, and they were told what to do, where to look.
Fascinating.
Pardon me?
I said this is fascinating. And where did you get this information? I mean, how did you unearth this?
Well, the information took years and years of work. It's a synopsis that you're getting of 25, 30 years of work. But it began with a book called Best Evidence by David Lifton, where he analyzes the medical evidence and starts to point out discrepancies. And then that got me curious. I was reading that, and because I was invited to Chicago to become the first person to stand on stage and say, this Zapruder film is a fraud. This Zapruder film has been radically altered. Besides the 2 versions that were taken, they cut 10 feet of film from that. And they joined it and spliced it, but a straight joint and a splice would be very obvious because everything would jump. So what they did is they cut frames and constructed partial frames that were inserted into the film using the golden mean of a ratio of 1 to 1.618. And as a result of that editing, when the chops in the film go, they are not perceived by the ordinary person because they've basically been organically sewn into the matrix of the film. But to get back to Tippit, what happened was I went to Chicago to expose the Zapruder film, and I was only allowed to present before a closed session of the world's most famous JFK researchers, including the man who had handled the film for the last 15 years and had a monopoly on it. And I call him handler because he was foisting on the public the film that the government wants the people to believe is an actual rendition of what actually happened, and actually it's not. So anyway, during that time, as I was preparing for this conference, I read up on everything I could find on the assassination, and I came across Jim Bishop's The Day Kennedy Was Shot. At that time, my girlfriend asked me, Robert, where was Tippit shot? And I knew from the New York Times report that I'd read myself and seen Tippit dead, and his funeral was on Saturday. Now they're making it on Monday. A lot of cover-up story parts of this for different reasons. But I told her what the New York Times had said. Tippit was shot in the eye. His face was horribly disfigured. He was sealed in his casket, and nobody, not even his wife, was allowed to see the body. And on Saturday afternoon, he was buried, and guess who was at his funeral? Jack Ruby. Because Tippit was Jack Ruby's best friend and his closest contact with the Dallas Police Department. So Ruby and Tippit were a mafia criminal and a rogue cop. And I know women who knew Tippit, and when I showed one woman, Jean Hill, the lady in red, she's a famous character in the film JFK. She's wearing the red trench coat in the film. I showed her the picture, and she scowled, and she said, "Ugh, that's the scurv." And my friend George Michael Avica, a professor from Hartford, and I looked at each other. I said, "What did you say?" He said to me, "I think he said he's a skeeve." And I said, "No, I think she said he's a scurv." And she said, "Skeeve, scurv, he was all of them. I didn't like him. He was mean. He beat women." And then she went on to tell us that he killed people for the mafia. He ran heroin with Jack Ruby. There was nothing that he wouldn't do. That's what Jean Hill said to me about Tippit. So this hero cop myth that they put on us or foisted on us is another part of just that, the myth. Poor Tippit. Poor dumb cop. What I've just said, poor dumb cop, that's what his killer said. He shot him down, walked over to him on the street, surgically put a bullet in the head, one single bullet, and then walked away, dropped the bullets, and said, "Poor dumb cop." Why? Tippit was part of the assassination plot with Ruby and others. Then he was told that he was going to be the hero because he was going to capture the killer and kill him, and then he'd be the hero. What Tippit didn't realize, and I don't know how he didn't realize it, was that he was another patsy. He was another scapegoat. He was the getaway vehicle. Because when I was at that conference in Chicago, before 200 of the world's top experts, there was a question and answer period, and I stood up and I said, "I have a question. Why have we not seen more than one single picture of Officer Tippit in all the 30 years since this happened?" And the picture that we've seen of Officer Tippit is one of a very young man, not a 39-year-old man. He looks to be about 26. Why do we know nothing about this man, and who has his autopsy? Why have we never read about it? Because I've found out a fantastic thing. Tippit was shot in the temple, and the bullet hit at the back of his head and did not exit. And it's possible that Tippit's brain was used for the JFK autopsy, and that his brain was substituted. Now, some people laughed. I mean, obviously, like some people laughed at that. But the man at the podium, the master of ceremonies, was Professor George Michael Avica, University of Hartford, and he said, "Hold on a second. Now, don't laugh, because I've gone down to Dallas, and I've investigated Tippit, and I found out that Tippit bore such a close resemblance to President Kennedy that his friends on the Dallas Police Department used to rib him and call him Jack and JFK. Now, to be called Jack and JFK in the Dallas Police Department in 1963 was no compliment, especially to a good old boy.
Wow,
a good old boy who was a Minuteman and probably a Ku Klux Klaner at the same time.
Yeah, but that's fascinating. I've never heard that.
Yeah. So then I began the quest to find pictures of Tippit, and over the next 3-4 years, I kept finding better and better pictures of Tippit, and finally, I found one picture of JFK and one picture of Tippit with the same expressions on their faces, and I divided that picture in half from the top to the bottom along the center line and joined them, and I wrote The Ultimate Secret of the JFK Assassination. the JFK